So on this edition of the Secure Dynamics TechCast, I have with me a multiple time past guest, Christina Podnor. Welcome, Christina.
Hey, Ashwin, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too. So let's start off with something that we were talking about just before we hit record, which is this proliferation of websites literally overnight that show up with this pop-up either at the bottom of the screen or sometimes even more infuriatingly at the top of the screen saying, hey, we're going to blah, 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 technical jargon, and then here you need to hit this button called accept cookies. And 99% of these websites don't have, hey, what about do not accept, right? So how did this come about? Clearly regulations is a big driver behind it, but who decides what gets placed? Is it driven by legal counsel? Is it driven by marketing? Is it driven by tech people? And what, in your world, how is this thing evolved to a point right now where the customer experience is so bad?
So it's a combination of things. And I see this every day, Ashwin. In fact, it's sort of funny because I work with lawyers regularly. And I think it was last week or the week before that, I sort of blew one of the lawyers' minds because I said, you know what we're going to do is we're actually going to write this new privacy policy, and we're going to look at the Fleisch scale, which is basically a readability scale, right? And it actually shows you when you're writing content to what readability are you writing it towards. Wow. And so I said, we're going to write it towards the 12th grade level, which means that somebody who's finished high school should be able to read a privacy policy and understand what we're saying. In other words, use plain speak, things that people can actually understand. It's not legalese, et cetera. And it was fascinating because most people don't know that there's actually a component inside of Microsoft Word that allows you to do this. So you already have the tool on your desktop. You can use it to write in plain speak. You don't have to write in legalese. And I actually used the Disney privacy policy, right? Because a lot of kids go to the Disney site and you would think they're writing to a kid level. Yeah. And from a user experience, that would make sense, right? And so I actually used their privacy policy. And I think on the first pass, it was, reading to something like a 17th grade level, which obviously is like, wow, I'm getting past college and into a master's degree. Yeah. And then we started changing it and backing down. And finally we got it to a 12.3 rating level. And I said, this is what we're aiming for. And what it is you get legal who's like, but no, the law says, right? And legal gets stuck on this notion oftentimes, which is because the law says we're trying to get risk to zero, and thus it has to be complicated, and it has to be cumbersome, and it has to be in legalese because it has to stand up in court, right? And what they can't necessarily always do is put on the different glasses and look through the different lens and say, look, yes, it's about risk and it's about ending up in court, but it's also about people actually understanding what we're trying to say.
So again, talking quickly about what you mentioned, right? And this was an article that you had written. So I want to kind of get into the user experience piece, which is really about what you talked about, zero-party data, right? And talk a little about what is zero-party data and how does that force organizations kind of put the consumer experience first?
Absolutely. So for a lot of organizations that are already used to GDPR, like we and I talked about years ago, or even if they're actually doing CCPA, they should have privacy by design forefront of their mind, which is when I'm actually looking to engage you, Ashwin, as a user or somebody in your audience, what data I'm actually collecting, is it necessary? Does it help you? Or does it just help me? Is it making money for me? And so zero-party data, right? We used to talk a lot about like first-party data, which is data about me as a person. Zero-party is actually one step before that. It's the actual data that you get directly from me as an individual, as a user, that I willingly give up to you because I understand the value proposition, and the quid pro quo that I'm getting is valuable to me, and I actually control that data in your world, which means I own it, it's mine, I'm giving it to you to use it for something, but at the end of the day, you recognize that it's for my benefit, and the moment that I actually want to stop having you own that data or having you use or process that data, it's gone. It's back with me, it's zero party, it's mine, right? You can layer on top of zero party data, things like first party data, which is all about how I navigate your website, or perhaps, cookies related information, since we were talking about cookies and accepting cookies a moment ago, versus things like second party data, which is when an organization either obtains data or goes out and starts to buy data that they insource, or third party, which is what we see a lot of these days still, which is I'm actually getting data about Ashwin from Facebook because I fed Facebook your email address or your phone number or lookalikes, and now they're actually harvesting data from multiple sources, and I get to take that, whether or not it has any correlation to anything that you're aware of, doesn't matter. Really bad user experience, right? This is the creepy stuff that we see where you go on the web and you're like, I just asked Alexa about this a moment ago in my kitchen.
Yeah.
Why is every ad now showing up on my website with XYZ product? Right? And people go, that's just creepy. Like, it doesn't feel good as a consumer. So the idea is, can we stop those creepy shows and kind of get more to this like zero party and first party data, which is all about engaging with individuals. It doesn't have that spray and pay mentality. And it's really more about, can I get a small, very focused set of data that's valuable, that's engaging, and that at the end of the day translates into business. But it does so because it provides the right value to you at the right time in the right context.
So in your mind, again, given your experience with lots and lots of companies out there, right, which group inside an organization typically spearheads this effort? Because I can think of lots of other groups. Hey, there's competition. We can get highly targeted prospect list and so on and so forth. So again, which group typically talks about, hey, we need to take a different path. We need to go down this zero-party data?
So it's fascinating enough. The people who are the biggest offenders usually are sales, because they're on the clock and they have to make the sale, right? So they're sort of like the biggest offenders. So they're on one extreme. The other extreme is the lawyers, right? Who are like, take nothing, like don't even take their email address, don't take their name, because then we're safe, right? The lawyers would actually shut down the internet and they would be so safe, right? There would be like no risk whatsoever. And so the people really that are left in the middle are the folks like digital marketing, right? The product development teams, the business units, the digital operations teams that are managing things like your website, the technical architecture or the IT team that's supporting the infrastructure. Those folks are left in the middle. And that's where what they're doing is highly dependent on the culture of the organization. I've been inside of organizations where they're always doing the right thing because that's the culture, that's how they think. It's really because they're mission driven, so it just extends to that user interface. And then I've been in environments where they're like, what is this thing, privacy? Why would we even want like private data, right? Everything should just be ours and we own it all. And we'll never give you anything back, Ashwin. So I think that for a lot of folks, it really has to be the marketing team that's actually driving this, because it's a fine balance, right? Between what are we collecting and that user experience that you talked about. And more what I'm seeing, believe it or not, crazy, the voice of sanity inside of the organization is coming from the consumer care team.
Interesting.
And it's fascinating, right? Because we went from like consumer care team was like the team that nobody talked to. They were the last people in the poll. And now they're almost like the first in line because they get the brunt of the burden when consumers aren't happy. They're hearing about it in social media that they're mining. They're actually getting phone calls. They're getting people like blasting them in different online contexts. And so they know, an email campaign just went out that isn't sitting quite well with consumers. Why? Because look at the numbers of people unsubscribing, right? They're tanking. And so I'm calling the consumer care team the new heartbeat of the organization that marketers can basically collaborate with along with business units and say, look, how do we really build a great user experience that puts the user at the heart of everything we're doing, that respects privacy as a value, right? And treats it with respect. And can we actually build something that's so innovative and so good and so helpful that Ashwin and Christina are just going to go, yeah, you can have my data because that is awesome and it makes my life easier. And we're all aware of those products. We all have those, products or services in our lives, but we need more of that and we need more teams to act like that.
Well said. Again, fascinating discussion. I'm going to obviously look for companies that provide that level of consumer engagement and willingly offer my data in exchange for something in return. So again, thanks for your time, Christina. Looking forward to our next conversation.
Thanks, Ashwin. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye.